in level 3, we will be solving multi-step absolute value equations. It's going to be similar to level 2, but in level 3, the absolute value expression is not by itself yet. So to solve this absolute value equation, you must first isolate the absolute value, or get the absolute value expression by itself. So looking at this first example, we want to get the absolute value of 2x minus 3 all by itself before we split it off into two separate equations. To get it by itself, first I would subtract 3 from both sides, and we get negative 2 times the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals negative 10. And then I want to get rid of that negative 2 in the front. Since it's being multiplied by negative 2, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. And we get the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals positive 5. And now I have the absolute value isolated. And then once you have it isolated, then you split it off into two separate equations. So my two separate equations are 2x minus 3 equals positive 5 and 2x minus 3 equals negative 5. Add 3 to both sides. We get 2x equals 8. Divide by 2. We get x equals 4 as one solution. In our other equation, add 3 to both sides. We get 2x equals negative 2. Divide by 2 on both sides, and we get x equals negative 1. And those are our two solutions. Now feel free to pause me and try the next one on your own. We'll go through it. And so again, I want to get the absolute all by itself first. I would have to subtract 5 from both sides first. And we get 2 times the absolute value of 4x plus 1 equals 10. Then we would divide both sides by 2, and we get the absolute value of 4x plus 1 equals 5. And now that I have my absolute value isolated, I split it into my two equations. So one equation is 4x plus 1 equals positive 5. The other is 4x plus 1 equals negative 5. And then we solve them both. Subtract 1 from both sides. We get 4x equals 4. Divide by 4 on both sides. X equals 1 is one solution. And then subtract 1 from both sides in this equation. We get 4x equals negative 6. Divide both sides by 4. And you get x equals negative 6 over 4 reduces to negative 3 over 2. And those would be our two solutions. Now one final example, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides to get the absolute value by itself first, and I get the absolute value of x plus 1 equals negative 2. And remember from level 2, if you ever have your absolute value set equal to a negative number, there is no possible way that the absolute value expression will ever come out negative. So this is no solution. If there is a negative number, once you get the absolute value isolated, you just stop right there. Don't split it into two equations. Don't continue. It's just no solution. It doesn't matter if you start off with a negative number on one side of the equation before it's isolated. What you want to look at is the equation once you have the absolute value isolated. Make sure the number on the other side from the expression is positive. If it's not positive, you stop. In our second example, once we got the absolute value isolated, we had a positive number, so we were good. In part C, we started with a positive, but once we subtracted 5 from both sides, we had our absolute value expression set equal to a negative, so that is no solution. And one last example that involves function composition. Remember that f circle g of x, that means f of g of x equals 13. This means I'm plugging g of x into f of x. So I take this expression from g of x and I plug it in to the x in f of x. So we get 2 times, and then instead of x, I replace x with the expression, so I put my absolute value sign, x minus 2 over 8 plus 7, and then according to this equation, I'm going to set it equal to 13. And now I solve. So again, first I want to isolate the absolute value. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. And we get 2 times the absolute value of x minus 2 over 8 equals 13 minus 7 is 6. Then I would divide both sides by 2 to get the absolute value by itself. And we get the absolute value of x minus 2 over 8 equals 3. Now I have my absolute value isolated, it's all by itself, so I split this into my two equations, which are going to be x minus 2 over 8 equals 3, and x minus 2 over 8 equals negative 3. To solve this equation, I would multiply both sides by 8 to cancel out the 8. And we get x minus 2 equals 24. Then I would add 2 to both sides. And we get x equals 26 for the first solution. And then in the other equation, again, I would multiply both sides by 8 to cancel out the 8 in the bottom. And we get x minus 2 equals negative 24. Add 2 to both sides. And we get x equals negative 22 as our other solution. And we're done.